Have you ever installed a program on your computer and then looked at this little language selection tab that comes up with all the different flags and wondered,
What?
this led us to wonder that should languages actually have flags, then what's the rule for deciding which language gets which flag? And I'm going to go through a few examples of just this selection here and then a few extra ones as well, starting with English. Now a lot of the time English I would represent with this flag, because for me English is British English, but obviously a lot of people in the United States would represent it with an American flag. You know, I mean, this does make some kind of sense to me. As much as I would protest to seeing the rebel rag raised, there are a lot more native English speakers in the United States than there are in the United Kingdom, even if English does originally come from the United Kingdom, and that is a well-known fact. So I guess those are two reasons versus one. Now, of course, however, English is spoken around many more countries throughout the world as an official language and as a first language. So there are actually a lot more English speakers in India than there are in the United States. So clearly it's not just a numbers thing. A lot of the time you will see with English that it is some kind of combined American and Union flag to represent the British. I personally use this one in the videos. I find this design really cool. It looks a bit like a squid. So actually aesthetics is the main reason why I chose this flag. Some have also used this one because then you obviously get the United Kingdom, you get the United States, as well as Canada, Australia and New Zealand, as well as a few other places with the Southern Cross. But then we're really only representing what is referred to as the Western world where English is spoken. And that ignores all of Africa and parts of Asia where English is spoken too, not to mention South America. But if we include everyone, we get this. And I think we can all agree this ain't it. So I would be quite curious to see what are people's thoughts about which flag they prefer to represent the English language. I've put a couple of the combined ones here, but if you'd rather have a US flag or a Canadian flag or screw it, a Zimbabwean flag, then let me know in the comments below. Another example, which I find interesting, is Portuguese. And that is because in this list, we see Portuguese, not with a Portuguese flag, but with the Brazilian flag. Now, if we followed the same logic as before, we'd have a split Brazilian and Portuguese flag. And this, again, makes some kind of sense, given that there are about 20 times as many Portuguese speakers in Brazil as there are in Portugal. But again, the language does come from Portugal originally and is spoken in many places around the world, as we can see here. So then maybe we should opt for this. But again, some of the same arguments that we could use with English can be used. For instance, that if we're going on number of speakers, there are 2.5 times as many speakers of Portuguese in Angola as there are in Portugal. So shouldn't they get a place on the flag? Well, some people have tried to do that, and no offense to the maker of this flag, but this ain't it. However, something more like this is a lot more tasteful. It does have some symbolism from Portugal's history on there and some relevance to other areas where Portuguese is spoken, as does this flag. So then we get a kind of generic Portugal flag that then can be used not for Portugal, the country, but for the language, with some of the colors that are also found on the flag of Brazil because of that colonial history. So let me know out of these designs which one we should be using for the Portuguese language flag, or should we use a different one entirely again? This is a little bit of a different example because with both English and Portuguese we have a very large, in fact a larger population speaking it in the Americas than in the original place it was spoken in Europe. However, with Arabic we have a lot of different countries speaking this language, and of course a lot of people seeing it as a religious language too. Now there are a few approaches that I found online for how we deal with portraying this language. One of those is simply to use this flag, which is the flag of Saudi Arabia, which at first sight seems like quite a good option. It has the word Arabia in it. It's what people think about when it comes to Arabic, and there are 31 million speakers. However, that comes in at just number 6 in the number of countries with the most Arabic speakers in them. Number 1 being Egypt with 102 million Arabic speakers, followed by several other countries in North Africa and the Middle East. So there is what may be termed the Duolingo approach, which is to show a flag that can be related to a language but that isn't a national flag or made up of various other elements, but has something to do with the language, particularly the writing system or the name of the language in the particular script. So that's what we see here with this flag, for instance. Now Duolingo uses a slightly different one, but again uses Arabic characters and the color of green on the flag. Now this gets interesting when we take a look at our next example. Oh Jesus, I've gone full New Zealand. When we look at our next example, which is of Hindi and Urdu, which are essentially the same language but written with a different script. Now, if we look at how Duolingo does this, they use the Indian flag to portray it. Now this makes some kind of sense because, as we can see here, they are using the Devanagari script, which is the script in which it's written in India. Now some people then use this as a way of modifying the Indian flag to show which script is being used in which language. So this simply says Hindi in the same script. But it's true that while this is spoken by some 691 million people in India, 164 million people in Pakistan speak Urdu as well. So what happens if we want to show both on a flag or particularly linguistically? This is an issue because if we just use the Indian flag without denoting that it's Hindi, there are of course many languages from India. So I would say this is quite a good way of specifically showing Hindi, that people can still associate it with India and you can read that it goes on about Hindi. And the same thing with Urdu. If we were to use the traditional script in which that language is written, then we would see something similar. This also gives us the possibility of having a kind of joint flag when we do want to use the term that encompasses both Hindi and Urdu, which at that point would be called Hindustani. Now, as you can see, I've attempted to make a joint flag. I'm not particularly proud of it, but if someone wants to email me a better version, then I would really like to see that. And that sounded very confrontational, but I mean it. I would like to see a good Hindustani flag. Now the next one I'd like to look at is Korean, and pretty much always with Korean, you will find the flag next to the Korean language being the South Korean flag. This does make sense because I'm not sure how many people in North Korea are downloading WinRAR, to be honest, so that does make some kind of sense. There are also about exactly 2 times as many speakers of Korean in South Korea as there are in North Korea. But if we want to be inclusive, then we should put them both on a flag, and personally I think this design really sick, really something good going there. If there ever is a united Korea, this would be a great option to kind of include everyone on that flag. Alright, so this is going to be the most complicated one of them all, which is Chinese. Now, as you can see, Chinese is often split into simplified and traditional, and we have 2 flags being used. Now, one of the flags is the flag that most people will associate with China. This is the flag of the People's Republic of China, or Mainland China, where the vast majority of Chinese speakers live. However, Chinese as a term is not actually a specific term for one language, but technically for several related languages, not all of which are mutually intelligible with one another. So technically, if we have a Chinese language option, then it's good to have several of these shown in these flags. So these are Chinese language flag number 1 and number 2, even if almost always the variety that's being used will be Mandarin Chinese. This is the Chinese variety around Beijing, which forms the standard for standard Chinese, which is being used. However, we sometimes will see other names being used as well. For instance, Cantonese is technically Chinese. It's a variety of Chinese, a Yue variety of Chinese, but it isn't mutually intelligible with Mandarin. So then it's confusing that sometimes we see Chinese with this flag, particularly with traditional Chinese, this of course being the flag of Hong Kong, where the majority of Cantonese speakers live. So, as I mentioned, it's split into simplified and traditional, but this doesn't actually refer to language, but rather to characters, as these are the various alphabets that are used within China and Chinese-speaking areas, this being traditional Chinese on the left, and this being simplified Chinese on the right. But neither of these are actually Mandarin, because these are both Cantonese written in 2 different scripts, and on the far left we have Mandarin written in the same 2 scripts, the distinction being traditional and Chinese. So most often you'll find that traditional Chinese is represented with the flag of Hong Kong or the flag of Taiwan. Personally, I think the flag of Taiwan or the Republic of China is a better choice, given that in Hong Kong the Cantonese language is native, but whenever they're putting traditional Chinese, they're putting Mandarin written in traditional symbols and not Cantonese, which is the actual language there, and so they've conflated alphabet and language. Whereas in Taiwan, they do actually speak a form of Mandarin and use traditional characters. And then for Simplified Chinese, which is the main way that Chinese or Mandarin is written in the People's Republic of China, Mainland China, then to use that flag seems to make sense. Alright, so I'm going to close out with two examples which you probably won't find on most installation discs, but which it's history with Hilbert, so I'm going to talk about. And the first of those is Afrikaans, a language which is spoken in South Africa. Now, it's one of 11 official languages in South Africa, and the most common way, at least with a quick Google search, that Afrikaans is portrayed with a national flag is simply with the South African national flag. Now, this is easy, it's simple. However, it ignores the fact that obviously we have 11 national languages, so with this flag alone, you can't actually tell which one we're talking about here. Now, some people use this flag for Afrikaans. This is the old flag of South Africa, which was in use from 1928 to 1994. It's also the flag that was in use during the apartheid era. Now, it may seem more appropriate to use this for Afrikaners because of the references to the Dutch on this flag and the Boer republics, of course Afrikaans being a descended language from Dutch. However, it ignores the fact, one, that this is the apartheid flag and it has a lot of political baggage on top of it, but two, also that the Afrikaans language was created by several non-white, non-Afrikaner groups who learned Dutch and then brought several different African and East Asian influences into Afrikaans to make it what it is today and different from Dutch. Now, this next flag doesn't have the same political baggage that the previous South African flag has. This is the Afrikaner flag, the flag representing the Afrikaner people, who of course also speak Afrikaans. However, the Afrikaners are not the only people in South Africa who speak Afrikaans. In fact, while 39.5% of speakers of Afrikaans are white, just over 50% are actually coloured. Now, this term may seem offensive to some people outside of South Africa, but this is the term that is used to denote people of a particular ethnic and cultural background who are mixed of European, Asian, and African descent. And many of these people speak Afrikaans, and in particular a certain type of Afrikaans that differs from that spoken by the Boere or the Afrikaners further inland in the country.
Ons is bekend as Kaapse kleerlinge, so ons het ons eie soort van Afrikaans wat verskillend is van Afrikaners Afrikaans. Byvoorbeeld, 'n Afrikaner sal sê so of sê so. En vandag is Afrikaans ook baie gemeng met Engels, dat ek is 'n Kaapse vlakte of Kaapse kleerling soort van Afrikaans, dit is nie so 'n Afrikaner boer Afrikaans nie.
This type is spoken around the Cape Colony, or what was the Cape Colony, and it's something you can find out more about in my video about Cape Malay people and how the first Afrikaans was written in the Arabic script. My solution then, and a flag that I came up with myself, as you can see, done a lot of editing here, is simply to use a modern South African flag, but instead of using a red upper section, to use an orange upper section. That is of course orange for the House of Orange and for the Dutch connection, given that around 90 to 95% of Afrikaans vocabulary does come from Orange, but it's less divisive. It seems to include people that actually speak the language, and you can clearly see that it is South African at the same time. So personally, that would be my suggestion, but let me know in the comments below which of the Afrikaans language flags do you think that is best used for the Afrikaans language. And to completely close out, let's look at Frisian. So most of the time when we find Frisian being represented, it is with this flag. But technically this is the flag of Friesland, so only the part of Frisia that is in the Netherlands where the West Frisian variety is spoken. So then we might use this flag to represent all the varieties of Frisian that are spoken in West, East and in North Frisia, which is of course the Inter-Frisian flag. But as you may remember from this video I did on the subject, this is actually an unofficial flag and is a political rather than a linguistic flag, given that this also covers areas, for example most of East Frisia, where no Frisian is spoken at all. These are the areas where linguistically Frisian is spoken. So we have West-Friesland in the Netherlands, we have Saterland or Saterland in Germany, and in northern Germany we have North Frisian. The best approach seems to be to use the individual flags of either Friesland, Saterland or North Frisia when talking about that distinct language variety of Frisian. But when using them together, I came up with this design, which you can let me know what you think about it in the comments below. But this actually incorporates elements of all three of these areas where Frisian is still spoken today, and then using the particular colors. It's gone with the design of the province of Friesland because I think it's a great design, and because the vast majority of Frisian speakers do come from the part in the Netherlands from the province of Friesland, but then with colors taken from the other flags to represent the other areas where Frisian is still spoken. But let me know, what do you think about this flag? Do you think we should use the flag of the province of Friesland, the most recognized? Do you think we should use the Inter-Frisian flag, which isn't officially recognized? Or should we use my interesting rainbow colored flag to represent all the areas? Well, let me know in the comments below. I'd quickly like to shout out this as well on Reddit, made by Creative Flagger, which also helped to inspire this video, which is many new flags being created for the world's most spoken languages, which is combining several of them. What do you think about these? Are these better than some of the ones that I put forward in my video? Well, I'd be very curious to hear about that. So everyone, thank you very much for watching this video about the flags of languages. Let me know anything you thought about it in the comments below, and anything you'd like to see videos on in the future. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Onsien.